Welcome to the broadcast, my juicy fruits. It is the first broadcast of the month and of the year, so it's time for you to subscribe, if you mean to subscribe. If you found yourself accidentally unsubscribed, then subscribe. Press the button, ring the notification bell, and it's time for me to thank any of you who might have sent a tip jar treat my way over Christmas time. Thank you if you treated me to a cup of coffee or a bauble or a trinket. I really do appreciate it very much. The focus is actually going to be on you today because the variety amongst the fruit basketeers here on the broadcast thrills me. I learn so much from you guys. It is always food and fruit for thought. So I will be weaving in your thoughts and your personalities in today's broadcast and introduce you to a few characters. It always astounds me who drops in to say hello here on the broadcast, including one of my own personal icons over the past few weeks. An icon from the world of pop and art and music and creativity, wonderfully juicy, has popped in to say hello and leave a few comments and also share their disdain for the Duchess of Sussex. Not a fan of the Duchess of Sussex, I gotta tell you, and I will be revealing who that star is during this broadcast. Yes, amongst us. As well as another viewer who met the King last week. Yes, we're going to be hearing from them. But to celebrate all of you collectively, I have made a donation of £150 in your name to Evelina London. And with gift aid, that should bring up the total of the donation to about £190. And we've heard quite a lot about Evelina London in recent broadcasts because the Princess of Wales is a patron of Evelina, and you might recall little Tony Hudgell, who lost both of his legs as a young child due to abuse that he suffered at the hands of his birth parents, and it touched me very deeply, and I know that it touched a lot of you very deeply and profoundly in the comment section. I noticed it, and he is the best of the best. So it was a bit of a no-brainer when I was considering who to donate to for the season. He popped up, his fundraising efforts for the place that saved his life as a baby popped up in my memory. He raised over £1.5 million, so I'm afraid I cannot match that, my dear. But what I can do is make a humble donation on your behalf, draw your attention to the charity, and I will leave a link in the description box below to that very charity for those of you who might want to make a separate donation. But you also might recall that I made a similar donation a few months ago to cancer research in your name because we lost a basketeer, didn't we? Remember lovely Deborah Mattioli from Hawaii? We lost her to breast cancer. So I always try to choose a charity or something that resonates with us all, and I think that you will approve of this choice for Evelina's. And I knew that it would be money well spent. Well, I'm covered in oranges today, as you can see. Now, the colours always read differently over the lens to what I see here in real life. It's very, very orange, and so are the lips. I'm afraid it's not the most flattering shade on me, but I wanted to have fun. I wanted to go with the orange theme for a reason that I will share in a moment, not only because it's fruity. As soon as I saw this in the charity shop, I thought I thought of my fruits, and I thought, I've got to have it. As kind of disgusting as it is, I'm going to make it fabulous. And I'm wearing it because it relates to the King's Christmas message and the tree that was behind him, the living tree that had dried fruits all over it, especially slices of orange. And I've been feeling a little bit contrite about some of my rather blasé comments about the King's Christmas message because I didn't really give a full appreciation of that living tree because it is very river. I have to say it is very river in the fact that it's adorned and garlanded with fruits and spices, and it is a tree, and you know how much I rave about trees and love trees, and I didn't really give it credit where it was due. So it was a naughty river moment. Naughty river. And many of you praised the tree, rightfully so, including Bink Pen, who said, "Thank you, dear River. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, my dear." In regards to the King Charles's speech, I have to say, loved it. I loved seeing the beautiful tree and compared it to my personal Christmas traditions. I could almost smell the orange slices and spices and pine all blending together. It just gave a very humble and cosy vibe. You look divine for celebrating at midnight. Well, thank you, my dear. At midnight on New Year's Eve, I was actually taking a shower. How rock and roll, how rock and roll. I entered the shower last year and I exited the shower this year. A brand new me, smelling of roses, actually roses and geranium. Yes, I was in the shower. I didn't even wake up with a hangover. I celebrated on New Year's Day, actually, rather than New Year's Eve. I've only had 2 or 3 really great New Year's Eves, to be honest. It's a bit of an anticlimax, I find, sometimes. So I celebrated the next day. But you are absolutely right, Bink Pen. Absolutely right. It was a stunning tree. And it should be celebrated, so I'm giving it more of a mention now. The thing is, there wasn't much footage of it. I mean, it was there behind him the whole time, but I would have loved to have seen some close-ups of it to see exactly what was hanging on the tree, all the spices and baubles and things that you mentioned. There wasn't much footage of it. I think they were missing a trick there, so far that I can find anyway. And we were treated to more glimpses of the royal family at church on New Year's Eve this time. And this time the Queen wore blue, and it was a gorgeous, wintry, powdery sky blue that really lifted the spirits, I thought. And she was joined by her sister, Annabel Elliot, who of course is one of her companions, one of her 6 companions. And I've decided that I'm actually going to make a feature of them whenever they pop up, the likes of Annabel Elliot and of Lady Lansdowne, because I just adore them so. I really love them, and I have confided in you in the past. I have confided in you that at least one of the 6 Queen's companions, at least one of them is a viewer of this very broadcast. Yes, the Queen's companions, indeed. We'll have to start calling them the Queen's Basketeers, won't we, my dear? Or instead of their Majesties, their Basketeers. That would be wonderful. I'll work on it. But do you remember in the previous broadcast when we looked at the service at St Mary Mag's, and I flashed up an image of 2 absolutely gorgeous women, and I said that it was a thrill to see them because they looked so much fun and so splendid, all dressed up, Stephanie and Bronte? Well, as it turns out, Stephanie is also a viewer of this broadcast. And she's got form as a royal fan, actually, which I didn't realise. Perhaps some of you might have recognised her. But Stephanie and Bronte had flown in from Washington, D.C., and they'd sprinkled some pizzazz over the Christmas service. And I received quite a few messages. Yvonne Smith said, I love Bronte and Stephanie, and Paula Sage said, Bronte and Stephanie, thank you for stepping up and representing the USA. You look wonderful. I hope you had an amazing time. Thank you, River, for including these women in your broadcast. It made me smile. Well, they made me smile. I think they made all of us smile, didn't they, my dears? And then Stephanie popped up in the comment section to leave me a message, and she replied to Paula Sage, and she said, let me tell you, Paula, it was an adventure and a blast. I cannot believe I landed on River's broadcast. Like, how and wow. Bronte left her phone in a taxi on day 2 in London. But it will be a hoot catching her up to all this. She told every stranger about how we made it to the BBC. Lol. And yes, they did. They made headlines on the BBC. It was pictures of the royal family all the way down, and then punctuated with a delicious picture of Bronte and Stephanie, our very own Basketeers. How's about that? And Stephanie said to me, River, I'm back from the UK and was listening and heard my name. I looked up and there I was in your broadcast. Lordy! Oh, so cool. I love this. We love it too, my dear. Thank you so much for this mention. Me and Bronte had a ball. His Majesty looked at us and said he was impressed. We got all the inside giggles. How can I get this message to River? He may never see it amongst the thousands. Well, I did see it, my dear. I did see it, and how fabulous that His Majesty noticed you and told you that he was impressed with you. How marvellous. And how marvellous you were in your Christmassy greens and reds, like ripe sprigs of seasonal holly it was. I thought it was an absolute tonic, and it's very clear to me that you are my kind of gal. My kind of gal, Stephanie Abdullah. And Stephanie Abdullah is also very well connected, I might add. Her cousin is Tone Bell, the comedian. He also has his own show you might know on CBS called Fam. And Stephanie went to visit him and watch one of his shows being made. And while she was there, she ran into Cheryl Lee Ralph, the fabulous Cheryl Lee Ralph, and she asked Stephanie for an interview because Stephanie had also been making headlines at the Harkle wedding a few years ago. Yes, she had gone all the way over to watch the Sussex wedding.
And we've got the fabulous looking Stephanie all the way from Washington, everybody.
And I should say that even though it sounds like Stephanie is a devoted basketeer, I do not know her current position on the Harkles and whether Meghan is in or out of favour. She obviously had great enthusiasm originally, and she's a woman of Jesus, so she will know mercy and she will know favour. So I'm not dragging her into any kind of drama, but she will probably know that we're not huge fans of them here in the fruit basket, are we, my dears? But it's not banned. People who like them are not banned from the fruit basket. They might be sour fruits, not so ripe and a little bit rotten, but they're still welcome here. You don't have to chime with me as long as you're respectful. If you're impudent, then you'll be shown the door and the fuzzy end of the lollipop. But I don't know what Stephanie's position is. What I do know is that she strikes me as a very fine woman.
I need you to tell us everything about what it felt to be there when His Royal Highness married Meghan Markle. Come on and tell me.
Oh my gosh, Cheryl and the world. This was absolutely overwhelming and amazing. Just an amazing experience to be there on the ground in London, on the long walk, outside of Windsor Castle. It was just, I want to say it was unbelievable, but it happened. It was real. It happened to me, and I just know the angels was working on my behalf.
She strikes me as somebody who is extremely positive and life-enhancing. She is a life enhancer. And that she worked at the US Army. I'm not sure if she still works there, but she did. She worked at the US Army, a woman of service. She is also a close friend of Bobby Brown. Prerogative. Yeah, Bobby Brown. She's been a friend of his for 30 years, nigh on 30 years, so much, maybe he's a basketeer as well. Bobby Brown, the basketeer. Anything's possible. In fact, it's probably likely. But it was Mr. Brown that did the pinning duty at the promotion ceremony that Stephanie was involved in. As an Army Sergeant First Class, he did the pinning. Yes, he did. Not the humping around. But I can't resist, sorry, my dear. But he did do the pinning. And Stephanie also serves as a public affairs NCO in Army Reserve. Stephanie served as a public affairs NCO in the Army Reserve and is an Iraq War veteran and a publicist. Well, all I can tell you, my dears, I said it once and I'll say it again, is that she seems like my kind of gal. She really does. She's royal. She shows up, she dresses up, and she sprinkles magic. And for me, you know that is what it is all about, my dear. Sprinkling that little fairy dusting of magic. I call it fairy dusting. That's what she does. Sprinkle, sprinkle.
You were in London. You saw Her Royal Highness. No. The Duchess of Essex, Meghan Markle, Sussex. You saw her. The Duchess of Essex. The Duchess of Essex. Her. The Duchess of Essex. There, the wedding, you enjoyed all the festivities. But now, this is the important question. Did you see Dreamgirls while you were there in London?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I didn't see Dreamgirls.
And this interview has now been terminated.
The Prime Minister of Australia has confirmed that their Majesties will be visiting this year. We discussed those rumours, but it turns out that it's true. And a spokesman said that the Prime Minister enjoys a warm relationship with the King and looks forward to welcoming His Majesty to Australia later this year. The travel plans are at an early stage, but they are expected to coincide with a long-haul trip in October because the King is attending a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa. And there was shock and excitement in the air, wasn't there, in Denmark, and also rather a lot of upset, I've got to tell you, over the shock abdication of Queen Margrethe.
Oh my God!
Prefer to be.
What? What? Fuck, vad syns du?
Martin, som altid har mødt mig med til.
Oh my god!
Ej, jeg vil helt kede
Yes, our Daisy Denmark. And please don't be offended if you drop in here, especially if you're Danish and drop in here and I refer to her as Queen Margs or Daisy Denmark. I mean it with nothing but absolute affection, and I use affectionate names for everyone. Absolutely everyone, not just members of the royal family, but in my own life. And some of them aren't the most flattering sounding names, but that's my humour, I'm afraid. And she is Daisy Denmark anyway, but I also call her Queen Margs. And that's the way I like it, or Margie. But that was a shock.
Ej, hvor hun cute, det kan jeg slet ikke have. Hun lille der, lille musemand.
Excitement in the air though for Crown Princess Mary of Denmark. It's lucky she had a regal name, isn't it? Such as Mary. We could have had a Queen Kylie, or what? Although it's a pretty name, but perhaps not so queenly. What else? Queen Sheila? No, that's a bit of a stereotype, isn't it? My unconscious bias about the people of Australia. But we could have had an Edna, couldn't we? Dame Edna could have become Queen Edna. Actually, Denmark has been on my mind a lot recently because I've been eating a lot of bacon, and I associate that with Denmark, Danish bacon, but also licorice. Oh, my fruits. I've never really been one for licorice. I could take it or leave it, but I'd never had like proper luxury, gourmet, handcrafted licorice. And I got my hands on some recently. Actually, it was a gift over Christmas. It was a gourmet version in various flavours, some mixed with chocolate, some crispy, and Danish made. Oh my, like crack, one would imagine, as addictive as, so dangerous. And I'm about to go on a 90-day experimental diet, and I'm not going to talk about it until I know that I'm actually in for the long haul, if you will, but it's a particular kind of elimination diet. Not for losing weight or putting on weight or anything, for health. And before I go on that journey, I know that I won't be able to have any sugar whatsoever. And so I was downing a few of these licorice temptations recently. They so good. So good. If I wasn't going on this diet, I think I'd have a new addiction already. I'm popping them like pills, my dear. Awful. I mean, wonderfully awful. So decadent, so divine, so delicious. Who knew? Licorice. Oh, yes, my dear, licorice. Give me that licorice. Never knew it could be so good. Because we have it in things called licorice all sorts here. Licorice all sorts. That's what I associate it with. And they're okay, but a bit sort of tarry. And I definitely wasn't a huge fan. But I'm coming over all funny. So good. I digress. But that's what I do on the broadcast. So, tough shit. Denmark. That's right. Daisy Denmark. No, Crown Princess Mary. The first Australian she will be to become queen. Or their version of queen consort, whatever that is. Of course, Australia already has a king. And that is Charles. So let's not get that twisted. King Charles and Queen Camilla are their majesties in Australia, but I'm talking about Australian born. Apparently the first queen ever. That's quite something, isn't it? And isn't it wonderful that she's lovely to look at, that she seems very, very charming, and she's extremely popular. Denmark love their royal family. They don't want out. From what I read, it's more popular there even than it is here, and it still enjoys very decent figures and good popularity here. From what I read, it's 80% in favour in Denmark, which is really something. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Queen Margrethe is 83 years old, and in the past has always spoken as if she intended to go on and on just like the late Queen Elizabeth until her death. as queen. Angela Hanley says, hello from Las Vegas, Nevada. Hello, my dear Angela. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Thank you. I always love your outfits, River. Very, very stylish and fashionable. Will you excuse me? I don't mean to denigrate your compliment. I mean, look at me. Is this fashionable and stylish? Oh dear, sometimes it just gets me. Well, yes, it is, isn't it? Maybe not so fashionable, but it's got a style about it. It might not be good style, but it's River style, what can I tell you? The dressing up box of life, the fruit basket, and the Satsuma squishes. Thank you, my dear Angie. Very, very stylish and fashionable. Absolutely. I'm fashion forward, my dear. This is the thing, you know. They'll all be wearing splashed oranges next season. Did you hear that the Queen of Denmark announced her abdication today? I was absolutely shocked. I thought for sure she would serve until her death. I did not see this coming at all. I thought for sure she would be just like Queen Elizabeth II. I think I'm still stunned. Sounds like you need a few of the old smelling salts, my dear, to sober up. It's going to be interesting to see what the reign of her son, Crown Prince Frederick, and his wife, Crown Princess Mary, will bring, and what their reign will look like. And another point of view from Caxar, who said Queen Margrethe did the right thing, removing the princely titles from her grandchildren and reverting them back to Count and Countess. Now she will abdicate and give her son time to reign in his 50s. Yet King Charles III fails to put the country before his family had handled the drama of the Yorks and Sussexes. Well, if I play devil's advocate here for a moment, many actually do think that he has played a blinder and think that he handled the drama with zero drama coming from his side and with grace. So I must put that side forward. But having said that, I do understand your apparent frustration with King Charles, and I do most certainly take the point that you make. I'm sure that in some ways Daisy Denmark has made the bold moves that we all fantasize that King Charles might have made and had the opportunity, and that the late Queen might also have made, because let's face it, it was under her reign that a lot of these aspersions went on. But we all fantasize, don't we, about him, you know, cutting off everything, drafting new letters patent for the titles and the homes, and everything, and the princely title and every inch of nobility from him, you know, and a real sort of banishment from any sort of public association whatsoever. It's a nice thought. Well, Daisy Denmark sort of did it with her grandchildren, didn't she, my dear? But when it comes to her early abdication, I do feel, as much as I certainly understand why she wants to do it in this day and age where people live a very long time, not always in the best of health, where there's so much pressure. Early abdication, there's no doubt about the fact that it does ruin the romance of legacy. It ruins the romance of legacy. There is an inelegance about it. It feels like an abortion of sorts. But a long reign when somebody is suffering is inhumane, and the expectation for them to go on performing and functioning and working as a public servant into what could be 90s and beyond even these days, you know, has elements of the inhumane. The Kingdom of Denmark is made up of 3 different countries: Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. So there are 3 separate portions to it, and she is the first monarch of Denmark to abdicate in 500 years. And I think that it would be deeply upsetting, and I think it must have been deeply upsetting for her to have to make that decision and come to that conclusion for what will be a 52-year reign. And there are rumours going around that it is part of some calculated strategy to try and deflect from the rumours surrounding her son's marriage and rumours of an affair when it comes to Crown Prince Freddie. And they are saying it is in order to save his marriage. Well, what I've been told behind the scenes is that this is balderdash. What I've been told behind the scenes is that rumours of an affair are bollocks. But whether or not what I've been told is true, and whether or not there is smoke without fire, I think that Daisy Denmark is too wise. And if you've heard her speaking before, you'll know that she possesses wisdom and respect. She is too wise to implement that as a strategy, as they are calling it, a strategy to save their marriage. I think if anything would save it, it would be more breathing space rather than pressure. And perhaps it doesn't actually need saving. And if it did need saving and need fixing, I really don't think it should be rushing to make them king and queen at this very moment. That doesn't add up to me whatsoever. There is also timing to consider, because it was only very recently, in October, that her grandson turned 18. Prince Christian. He turned 18 years old. So that could have been a factor in her timing, because he was obviously be available for more work, if you will, as his father ascends the throne. But in 2016, Daisy Denmark said, "It's always been that you stay as long as you live. That's what my father did and my predecessors, and the way I see it too." So what we can ascertain and what we can extract from what we learn about her abdication is that it must be for rather dramatic reasons, soul-shaking, soul-stirring kind of stuff, which she has blamed on ailments and her bad back, which was operated on, and the effects of ageing on her body, which are all extremely valid reasons, let's face it. But I would love to throw it open to you, if any of you are especially in the know. I'm not just talking about guesswork, but if any of you are in the know, let me know exactly what's going on. I would be intrigued to hear and share it with Basketeers, if you don't mind me sharing. And I'm going to read the translation of the last segment of her abdication speech, which was part of her New Year's speech, and was rather good actually when you read the translation. It covered subjects such as anti-Semitism and on themes of gratitude, but I will read it for your delectation and your consideration at the very end of the broadcast, so that I'm not waffling on even more than usual. But for now, we will move on from one queen to another, because I've been delighted to hear from the iconic Queen of Pop, Marilyn, over the last couple of months. And Marilyn grew up in Jamaica, actually, before moving to these shores. Marilyn is an artist, a creative, a chanteuse, and I've danced around my bedroom on many occasions to their song Calling Your Name, amongst others, but I will leave the link to the video for that song in the description box. It's great. A known beauty, and came through during the famous sort of Blitz Club era, although I do believe that Marilyn wasn't such a fan of the Blitz. He actually was more of a fan of the Embassy Club, where the music was a bit more disco and soul rather than the new romantic sort of scene. That wasn't really his bag, and actually his taste jives a lot more with mine when it comes to music of that era. And in fact, we have many parallels. Marilyn used to go for a boogie-woogie at Embassy in Mayfair, and I boogied there too, but I also worked on the door there. You know, it still goes. I mean, I wouldn't go there these days, my dear, but there was a time when I worked on the door as a door whore, my dear. Not actually for the club, but for the DJ, who I would traipse around after. So we had that in common. And that's one of several connections that we have, because Marilyn also lived in Kentish Town with a bunch of creatives, including Boy George, and squatted in Kentish Town. And it always really inspired me, because I'm very familiar with Kentish Town and have lived there off and on a lot. It's a place that that I hold very dear to my heart. And I used to hear the stories of Marilyn and Boy George running around Kentish Town and Camden and the streets. And I always wondered exactly which road it was that they lived on. I never found out. But on one of my charity shop trips, I came across an autobiography of Boy George's called Take It Like a Man. And it's an autobiography that I always really liked. It was written together with Spencer Bright, and Spencer Bright does a wonderful job, I think, of getting over the story of Boy George's early years and his fame. And that's really where I discovered the character of Marilyn, or Boy George's version of Marilyn, I should say. Because I'm sure that Marilyn probably wasn't entirely happy with the depiction of him in that book, but that is how I first came across Marilyn, really. And Marilyn is one who tells it like it is. There's no dressing up. He is straight down the line. And there is no bullshit. There is no bullshit with Marilyn. And he's not always going to tell you what you want to hear or what you like to hear. But if you ask, he'll tell you. Just don't object to the fact that he might tell you his truth. The love of his life is Gavin Rossdale, who he dated for 5 years when they were in their teens. They dated for 5 years, and then Gavin Rossdale went off to become a musician, and he was in Bush, and now he's married to Gwen Stefani. But back in the day, he was running around with Marilyn. And Marilyn acquired that name, by the way, because, obviously, had the look of a Marilyn trotting around London. Extremely glamorous, and a figure of great style. Well, Marilyn has left a few comments for me, which I've been enjoying, and also gave me a bit of a telling off in one of the comments. As I say, he speaks as he finds. And if you do it with charm and a little dose of affection, then that's absolutely fine. He gave me a telling off for comparing Meghan Markle to Diana. And I think perhaps I'd expressed my thoughts poorly, because I do adore Diana as well as seeing her flaws. So I think he might have misunderstood me a little bit on those lines. But he gave me a telling off and he said, "Hey, come on, you had me completely right up until you tried to push Meghan and Diana into the same kind of domicile." I love his turn of phrase. And the words that he plucks out sometimes. The same kind of domicile. I love it. That is going too far, babes. Meghan is a deeply twisted and vengeful, jealous and deceitful non-entity. He doesn't mince his words. What is it Boy George says about him in that book? He talks with a wiggle and walks with a lisp. Marilyn, if you're watching this, dear, you've got to say that was a pretty nice, I think that was a fabulous quote you got there in the book. He talks with a wiggle and walks with a lisp. Well, she may mince that walk from time to time, but she don't mince those words. She does not mince her words, my dear. And I got to tell you, Meghan is a deeply twisted and vengeful, jealous and deceitful non-entity. Diana, with all her flaws, is still not even in the same stratosphere, and I'm borderline shocked that you would even entertain such nonsense. Please don't do that again. And then he says, "Keep it up, gorgeous." And he spells gorgeous Gawjuss. Keep it up, gorgeous. Love Marilyn. Well, Marilyn has the charm to reprimand me and get away with it. Then Marilyn also returns with a compliment. "Hello. Gosh, you look beautiful this evening. And the tone of the jacket, tiara, etc. all align beautifully. Thank you very much. Oh, and your skin also looks incredible." Oh, my head. I also have a thing about good skin and everything around it. Thank you, my dear. That footage of the Queen at the tea party and kissing the little girl was just wonderful. Brought a tear to my eyes, honestly. Such a wonderful gathering, and what a fantastic event that was organised too. So you see there's a very soft side to Marilyn as well. Marilyn is not somebody that wants to be put in a box. There are plenty that want to be put in his, not yours or anybody else's, my dear. His box is his own. He doesn't want to be put into a box. And he is not just some two-dimensional pop icon flight of fancy. And I understand that. Even though I describe him as an icon, he's also a person. And he's a very loving, funny person. With a wicked side, as many of us have. I'm talking wicked sense of humour, not malicious evil, my dear. But he has inspired me in many ways throughout my life, ever since I discovered him in that book, in many ways. In fact, the very reason that I'm wearing these earrings, which I ordered months ago when I first had my ears pierced, is because Marilyn wears a similar pair, although these happen to be on silver, and I think his are on gold. These are my favourite sort of earrings, actually, and I always notice them on him. Sort of floating crystal droplets. I love them, but I was inspired to purchase these by him. This was before he reached out to me. And red sequins always remind me of Marilyn. His face, his extraordinary face, is so reminiscent of that era and of that sort of fabulousness. Marilyn can wear anything. He can wear a sackcloth, a tarpaulin, a rubbish bag, and exudes glamour. That is Marilyn. That face of his is extraordinary. When I used a form of slang or a secret language called Polari, I used that from time to time. And in the past, I used the word raya to describe my hair. I think I was wearing my hair down, but the raya, dear, the raya, some of you might remember. I got that from Marilyn, who calls his fantastic mane of hair, which he still has, his raya. I would give anything for that. Great big sort of flaming mane of hair that Marilyn has. Wonderful. But that is the raya, dear, which is R-I-A-H, which is the word hair spelt backwards. But always has inspired me in little ways. He tells a great story, especially when he spills the tea here and there. Some of those stories might include a little bit of shade thrown at Gina, Boy George. From memory, Marilyn is not what you'd call a fan of the royal family by any means. This is just from memory here. I don't think he has anything particular for them or against them. I think he sees them as individual characters. I don't want to speak on his behalf, as individual characters, some of whom appeal to him, some don't. But I do recall that he performed for Princess Anne at one of the royal variety shows and met her. And I do recall him saying, if not that he was impressed with her, yeah, well, it was something along those lines, yeah, that he thought that she was a really decent woman, and you could tell that, you were getting value for money with her, that sort of thing along those lines. So certainly a fan of her, and certainly not a fan of Meghan Markle, as he's made very clear. So I've been delighted to receive his comments. I wanted to share some of them with you. And do you see, my dear, from the opera singer Alessandra Mark, who continues to grace us with her presence here in the fruit basket, from her to a pop icon, to Marilyn. We have them all here in the fruit basket, all different flavours. Have a squeeze and take a bite, my dear. And the juice is effervescent. Do you understand, my dears? Do you understand? The juice is effervescent. Just make sure you wipe up your chin afterwards when it gets a bit sticky. But as for Marilyn's old mucker, Boy George, I do receive questions sometimes asking for my opinion on him, what I think of him, do I enjoy him, and his androgyny, all this kind of thing. Yes, I would say that I am a fan of sorts, although I don't know any of his solo music, to be quite honest with you. Actually, that's a lie. I know The Crying Game, which I think is wonderful, and probably a couple more. Yeah, a couple more, mainly Culture Club. Actually, my mother was a great fan, and is still a great fan, I suppose, of Culture Club. She had one of his vinyls, which I used to look at. I used to enjoy the cover, and the one Karma Chameleon, isn't it, with red, gold and green. I used to enjoy thinking of those colours, especially around Christmas time. Red, gold and green, red, gold and green. That's what I remember of that. And I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story about how he inadvertently threw shade on me, which I've never really recovered from. And this is going back to when I was very, 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 very tender of year, but I was already trotting around town, made up to the nines, living out my Marilyn fantasy, if you will, and shaking it with a few sequins and, you know, cheapness and beauty, if you will. And a friend got in touch with me and they said they're casting around for somebody to play Boy George. And I can't remember if it was in one of the TV specials that were made about his life, or a version of one of his musicals, or Taboo, or whatever. I can't remember what it was, or if it was a small scale production. But the casting was almost over. The time for casting, I think, was coming over like within a matter of days. And I decided to send a little homemade video of me on a laptop to Boy George via his Twitter to try and convince him and persuade him to cast me as him. It was rather naive of me to do so. And it did seem that Boy George was looking after his own Twitter account and didn't have a manager for all intents and purposes. So I thought, well, he'll see it. I'm sure he'll see it. And I can remember this day so vividly because it was so frustrating. I was absolutely broke. Didn't have a brass farthing to my name. Not to my name. But I thought, well, I'm going to have to dress up as Boy George to send off this video and convince him that I can look like him and sing like him. And I can remember going to Camden Market and I found a sort of wig with black braids in the hair, and then I bought some makeup, you know, white sort of geisha face makeup, and then some yellows for the eyes and some greens, and I bought a black sort of one of those hats that he used to wear when he was in Culture Club. And I guess in total I probably spent 50 or 60 quid. Well, that was actually a lot because I was broke, you know. I expect I went into overdraft. All I can remember is being absolutely appalled and dismayed that I was spending so much at such a high risk level, because there was no guarantee that he would even see this video. But I did that. I spent time getting ready, and then I recorded it in my room on my laptop, me singing along to a Boy George karaoke track. I uploaded it to YouTube actually, and I made the video private and I sent it to him with some sort of begging message. Well, I didn't hear back and I didn't get a reply, and you can't blame him for that. He's a busy pop star, and I was some young upstart invading his Twitterati universe, you know. I didn't hear back from him, and then a couple of weeks went by, or 3 or 4 weeks went by, and I went to look at the footage again. I was still private, or I should say unlisted. You can make it unlisted so that only the person with the link to the video will view it. Boy George was the only person that had the link to the video, or whoever runs his Twitter account. And I brought up my video, and it had 1 view and 1 dislike. You know, on the thumbs up, thumbs down. Well, you can't see the thumbs down when you're a viewer these days, but back then you could. And he or whoever had picked up the video had thumbs down my video of me singing. And I've got to tell you, I was so devastated, not only because he obviously didn't like my performance very much, but also because he was a fucking bitch, and C, because he'd been one of my heroes, and I'd loved that book about his life growing up, and I was absolutely devastated. And I can remember feeling so sour because I was so broke, and I'd spent money dressing up as him and all that energy and sent it off to him. I just thought, well, there you are in your great big fancy mansion in Hampstead, and you see all this effort that I'm making, and you're so fucking shady that all you're going to do is press dislike and not bother to respond and say, and by the way, don't come for him, my dears. I've gotten over it. Well, I haven't really got over it. I'll never really get over it. But, you know, I realised then, I really did, as I realise now, that you cannot love stars for being a little bit shady and then complain about it when they're shady. It comes with the territory, my dears. But to be honest with you, I was far too pretty and too slim. I would have made a far better Marilyn, but that had already been cast. So I'm telling you that little anecdote to let you know that, yes, I have known success in my life, but I've also known a hell of a lot of rejection, and that was one of thousands of moments of rejection. And you know what? It is character building, and that doesn't mean that I want any more rejection, because there's only so much character that one can build, my dear. But failure is a rung on the ladder of success, isn't it, my dear? And truth be told, I was brought up and raised with the old queens of yesteryear. I'm talking an older generation than Boy George. I was brought up and raised along a lot of those theatrical old queens. That's why political correctness is anathema to me, and why I'm in despair at the state of today's woke world, because these acidic, cackling, wicked old queens were also dazzling and brilliant and sparkling. And you take the rough with the smooth, my dear, and you develop a thick skin. Well, that's a bit of a lie, I suppose you could say. I think if you've got a thin skin, you'll always have a thin skin. But you can get used to the battering, if you will. Now, I also wanted to take a moment to thank many, 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 many of you who left suggestions for the word that I couldn't decipher in the document that I possess that was handwritten by Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. Thank you for your suggestions. There were so many of them. And so many of them were plausible. I haven't been able to pick one. But, you know, I had the suggestion many, many times of the word pages, of pays, P-E-Y-E-S, and its various meanings and translations. The word gauges came up, which is a wonderful word, isn't it? And it was hard to tell what the first letter was, whether it was a J, an F, an S, a G, or a P. You don't miss a trick. You really don't miss a trick. There is a wealth of knowledge. Sometimes I have to remind myself that if I need to know anything at all I need to do is ask my basketeers, because it's all there. If you recall, the first passage said, "The Queen has signed the warrants but thinks there is a mistake as Duncan's salary is but £80. She thought her blankety blank was £20. If it should happen to be so, another warrant must be made out." And this is the second comment today from Bink Pen, thank you, my dear. It said, "I'm an avid genealogist for over 35 years and have sorted many written documents. I'm not 100% on this because I believe part of the challenge may be down to Charlotte not knowing English as her first language. The word in question appears to be pays, P-A-Y-E-S. The English-French translation would be equivalent to salary or pay. A warrant would be the same thing as a cheque or note to indicate a promise. Charlotte is making sure that Duncan is to be paid what he or she is due. I understand she was raised German, but it's possible she had early exposure to French with her language education." Well, that is very plausible and a possibility, but also so was this other suggestion from Deirdre Kennedy, who said, "Greetings from Dublin and Happy New Year, River." Happy New Year, my darling Irish fruit. "Upon searching Google, I found a document detailing Queen Charlotte's household, which was compiled by Loyola University in Chicago." You fruits are really on it. "There is a person named Duncan referred to therein who is stated to be a page of honour. There are references to two people with the surname Rowland, which also appears in the document. One is Hugh, the other is Edward." As long as it's not Hugh Edwards, my dear. Oh dear, we won't go there. "Both are stated to have held the position of Messenger of the Treasurer. I would suggest that the word that is difficult to decipher may be pages. Perhaps it was in reference to an entry in the household accounts that Queen Charlotte thought was a mistake. Many thanks for your wonderful broadcasts. Deirdre." Thank you, Deirdre, my dear. Thank you so very much. It astonishes me what you come up with and what you find. That is very, very plausible. I also rather love the suggestion that is the word gauges as well. And to me, if I had to pick any letter that the first letter looked like, it would be a G, I suppose. But Kim and Ron and Dottie were just a few of you that suggested gauges. I thought of green gauges, which I love. But gauges was also an old form of wages, an old French word meaning salary, and an old English word meaning pledge. And a viewer called Autobot, these names. Autobot said, it's wages spelt phages with an F, because F was used instead of W when the word ends in the letter S. So many different possibilities. But you basket, I've said it before, and I will say it again. It's no secret that this comment section and the basketeers within it have developed a reputation countrywide, kingdom-wide, and beyond, including over the United States of America, the Anglosphere, and all continents. It's developed a reputation for having the savviest, most clued up, most educated, what's the word I'm looking for? Not elegant. Civilized fruits that hold discussions, have interactions, and share knowledge and insights and ideas. It's really something. And you deserve that fame, and you deserve that reputation that precedes you. You do. Right. I don't know why I've got the giggles. Don't you accuse me of melodrama. Don't you accuse me. Do you hear me? Don't you get gang-handed with me, lovey. Oh, fruit crumbles. You really are a bunch of fruit tarts. Do you know that? You really are, honestly. You disparage me? You disparage me? I won't stand for it. Right. Now, you can run along if you've had enough. If you haven't, then I promised that I would read out the portion of Queen Margie's abdication speech, where she abdicates. It's a very long speech, but this is just the end of it in my summing up, all right? Tonight, I would like to express a very special thank you. Thank you for the warmth and devotion which I and my family have received throughout many, many years. In 2 weeks' time, I will have been Queen of Denmark for 52 years. Such an amount will leave its mark on anybody, also on me. The time takes its toll and the number of ailments increases. One cannot undertake as much as one managed in the past. In February this year, I underwent intensive back surgery. Everything went well, thanks to the competent health personnel who took care of me. Inevitably, the operation gave cause to thoughts about the future, whether now would be an appropriate time to pass on the responsibility to the next generation. I have decided that now is the right time. On 14th of January 2024, 52 years after I succeeded my beloved father, I will step down as Queen of Denmark. I will hand over the throne to my son, Crown Prince Frederik. Tonight, I first and foremost would like to express my thanks. Thank you for the overwhelming warmth and support which I've received during all these years. Thank you to the changing governments with whom the collaboration always has been rewarding. And thank you to the parliaments who have always invested their confidence in me. Thank you to the many, many people who on special occasions and in everyday life have embraced me and my family with kind words and thoughts, turning the years into a string of pearls. That's lovely. The support and assistance which I have received throughout the years have been crucial to the success of my task. It is my hope that the new King and Queen will be met with the same trust and devotion which have fallen to my lot. They deserve it. Denmark deserves it. I will conclude my New Year's address in my usual manner. God bless Denmark. God bless you all. And I shall conclude my broadcast in my usual manner and ask you to channel the royal spirit, to stay fruity and always on royal duty. Ta-ra, my dears, and toodle pip.